Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Schilling with this week's Wednesday Wellness Minutes for Secoya Health, and this week we're going to be talking about sensory integration disorder, SID. So in the caption it says, got sensory issues. It's really most likely people that are younger, children of sorts, if you will, but some adults have this issue that lasts throughout their lifetime. So if you don't know anything about sensory disorder, sensory integration disorder, basically people have challenges. Maybe they can't have something touching their skin, they can't handle a texture or a taste. They might not be able to find their way through different spaces. They might avoid contact with things. Some kids just run into stuff. It just depends on what their issue is with sensory integration. So got some notes figured out here as far as kind of give you a breakdown. But we talk about it as the brain's, it's like a neurological traffic jam. All this stuff's coming in and the brain does not know how to process it. So we're going to be talking about today is talking about how this affects a person, how you can spot the signs and symptoms of it, but also what to do about it. And that's going to involve neurofeedback and QNRT and things like that. So as we were saying, one of the major things you want to understand about SID is it's often misunderstood as some type of spectrum disorder where kids have these sensory things and they sometimes avoid contact or eye contact or even including themselves in activities. That can be mistaken for social aversions and things like that are oftentimes associated with autism and things like that. But you want to understand that these children, most often children, are having issues with accurately interpreting the sensory information coming in, which means they don't know how to respond with the proper amount of force, proper amount of movement, how their spatial relations are, and stuff like that. So if you think about sensory, think about your five senses. You have your sight, you have your sound, you have your taste, you have your smell, and you have your touch. Sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. There we go, that's five. Fantastic. So what are some symptoms of SID that you might have witnessed in a young person or someone in your life? People being affected by loud noises. If a person hears a fire engine or an ambulance coming and they cower in a corner and they cover their ears and they maybe start crying, and it seems like an excessive response, but it's really their brain just overly stimulated by this information. Kids in classrooms are oftentimes labeled as problem makers because they're being overly stimulated by these different environments, and what happens is then they seek either to distract themselves or they seek some type of interaction to help calm their brains down. Very sensitive to certain fabrics. Some people cannot handle tags on them. I have a friend who daughter wouldn't wear underwear because it wouldn't be too much pressure in the groin area and things like that. It can manifest in a ton of different ways for different people. Loud noises we mentioned, hands over the ears. Some people prefer dark. Too much stimulus in the visual fields can be problematic for people. Smell odors, strong odors. Some people where it might be an offensive odor like a really strong chemical or even ammonia or something smell like that, they can't detect it. Their brains are not processing that information, which can be dangerous if you have a gas leak at home and they can't smell it. Hopefully it's an adult with them, but at any rate. We talked about movements, seeking movements, hanging on other people, furniture, objects. Some kids walk on their toes because they don't know how to process that information through their feet. The feet are one of the most important sensory feedbacks to your body. We'll talk in a minute about the hands, the feet, the toes, the fingers, the tongue, things like that. Kids that avoid climbing or jumping, they can't handle that type of input into their systems. They might avoid tactile things like glues or sand or things like that, the textures they cannot handle. They might be averse to walking in the water where they can't see the bottom of the lake and they have like a mushy sensation. They just can't handle that. They can't process that. But they might also have decreased pain and temperature awareness. They might actually seek out bright lights in order to stimulate the visual cortex. They might be overly affectionate. They might be really cuddly, and someone might label them like a mama's boy or something because they want that nurturing, that comforting, that sense of contact. So it works both ways, and as you can see. They might be accident prone, or they might actually be anxious because they are getting so much stimulus, their brain is being overloaded, and they don't know how to process, so they just get anxious. They get sweaty or heart racing, or they feel panicky, or you can see it on their face and things like that. So how we approach this is twofold. One is with neurofeedback, which is actually balancing the brain waves in the brain. And if you heard me speak about this a couple weeks ago, there's delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. Those are the 5 waves in the brain that are all related to the different areas of the brain and different markers. So we want theta-beta ratios, and when your eyes are closed, you want more delta, theta, and alpha. When your eyes are open, you want more beta and gamma, but you don't want too much. You want to make sure they're balanced. When these sensory things come in, what it does in the brain, it starts revving up certain areas, and other areas maybe not be able to be accommodating for all the stimulus, and that's where the traffic jam comes in. The brain cannot process. It's like it gets the wires crossed, and the brain does not know what to do with this. So what we do, specifically I wrote down an example of of how we might go about balancing the brain from a neurofeedback standpoint. So we want to look at calming the overactive areas of the brain. Pretty simple, right? If the brain's overactive, we want to calm it down. So that's going to be probably the right temporal lobe, occipital lobe, and the parietal lobes. But everything we do in the clinic is based on what the brain is feeding back to us. So we do an electroencephalograph, which is an EEG. We identify where the stress markers are, whether it's in the front of the brain, the back of the brain, or the temporal lobes. And then we determine, are there any trauma markers in there? And then we determine, based on what needs to be upregulated and downregulated, we base the treatment plan on that. So on the converse of the upregulation, we might need to downregulate or calm down areas of the brain like the sensory motor strip, the frontal and prefrontal cortex areas of the brain. These are all going to be important as far as balancing the brain. So this is how we do it from a neurological standpoint, actually helping the brain train itself. And if you've never done neurofeedback before, if you've never seen it before, basically you're watching a monitor, and what's happening is your ability to create the scene on the video or on the game or whatever it is, fill in the pieces of the puzzle, have the scene develop in the screen, is going to advance based on whether your brain is staying within the range of the brain waves. So if it wants to upregulate theta and downregulate beta, it's a tongue twister, downregulate beta, you might have to modulate your brain waves based on the picture in order to start filling in that picture, if that makes sense. And on the computer, we control what the feedback is. There's a certain threshold you set as far as the positive feedback, or it's called the reward center. You can set that at different percentages in order to stimulate along the progress. Like if someone's having trouble with it, you can give them a little bit more of a feedback, a positive feedback, or reward. But you can also actually monitor when a person's brain is becoming fatigued on these. Therefore, we don't really plan things based on time segments because we need to monitor very closely how a person's brain is functioning. And if they're starting to get really fatigued, we need to stop a session because we don't want to go too far past. It's like you're working out too hard. Your brain is literally a bunch of neurons that are working hard. And if you overexercise it, you can have problems. You can get a fatigue. So that gives you an idea. The other portion of how we function here is QNRT, and that's the quantum neural reset therapy. And that's really the functional neurological basis for balancing the brain. And what that does is that goes into the neuro-emotional side of things. It finds out where the traumas are trapped in the brain. And I focus specifically on the sensory cortex of the brain because that's, of course, what we're talking about, sensory integration disorder. Okay? So when someone has trouble with that, I focus on 5 different areas that are very specific to people because if you look at what's called the cortical homunculus on the internet, just type in Google images, homunculus or cortical homunculus, and you'll see this guy with these gigantic hands and feet, huge face and lips, and really, really skinny body, because that's a depiction of how your brain dedicates the neurons in the brain to each part of the body. We have a lot of sensory here on the tongue and on the feet, and not a lot on the torso. Okay, that's why when someone comes in with back pain, like it's like this strip, right? Because when there's an issue, your nervous system refers it up 3 segments or 4 segments and down 4 segments, so it looks like a big block on your back. That's why it's very non-localized. But if you prick your finger, oh boy, man, you feel it right there. It's like right there. Or on your tongue, you bite your tongue or you burn your tongue, it's like, it feels like it's this big and it's this tiny little spot on your tongue, okay? So just to give you an idea there. So when we think about the feet, think about feeling tied down or inability to follow in someone's footsteps. So this could be relevant for a child who's trying to follow in the footsteps of an older sibling, okay? Tied down, being limited, not being able to do the sports they want or something like that, that can affect them. The torso, so from here to here, think about being unable to break through or unable to get through something, some big challenge, some new thing that the child is being challenged with or something like that. Think about the toes, restricted or trapped, okay? And then we look at the fingers, inability to grasp maybe a concept or maybe grasp onto someone who is maybe leaving their life, or also inability to let go if someone's lost something in their life, they're unable to let go of that person. That can be really important. And the tongue is related to impulsive or hurtful statements that most likely people are receiving. People aren't usually affected by saying things to other people. It's when they receive them that they get this manifestation on the tongue because the brain associates that tongue with that part of the sensory cortex. But there's also the inability to say what you want or need. That's very important. Some of the underlying threads related to the sensory cortex are abandoned, blamed, grief, rejected, resentful, and manipulated or controlled. So if any of these are happening in a person's life, that can manifest in stress in the sensory or post-sensory cortex. And that will then potentially lead to symptoms. Now, I listed 5 here of the areas of the body that are potentially problems, but there are tons. I mean, I didn't want to list everything because you'd get bored and fall asleep and start drooling on your hand or something. I mean, you don't like that. Nobody likes that. So you go the toes all up to the top of the head. I mean, everything in between. There is never anything that happens in your body by chance. There's always a reason behind it. If you ever have a question and you can't figure out the answer, just let us know. We'll have the answer for you. I did write down a brief case study just to give you an idea. This is a real world example based on Anissa's little brother. And she mentioned a couple weeks ago, that's why I got the idea for this, about sensory integration disorder. But quintessential, right? Lacks body awareness, okay? This is described by mom, okay? Bumping into things, stepping on other people's feet, right? He has no idea where spatial relations are. That's part of the sensory integration. Sensory seeking, he's constantly moving, seeking noises, or making noises. He's wanting to stimulate the auditory portion of his sensory lobe, okay? And then we get into forgetfulness. That's probably the amygdala and the hippocampus, where his short-term memory, the sensory part is related to short-term memory. And so that's going to be affected, and especially with sequential events. And then we're going from like 0 to 100. I mean, she put 0 to 10, but 0 to 100, like ramping up quick. Like his emotional responses are from totally mild and nothing to way over the top, okay? So everybody's different, escalating events and things like that. So as I mentioned, we take care of people with this sensory challenge. Rather than calling it a disorder, it's just a challenge. It's something that can be overcome by using the proper tools. So we might even need to change the diet, change the lifestyle, get some anti-inflammatories in the brain, train some brain with the neurofeedback, get the stress out of the brain for the QNRT and things like that. This is always helpful. So we use the QNRT with the neurofeedback and, of course, some nutritional support. If the person needs a cranial adjustment, that's also helpful. If their cranial sutures got locked up, maybe they were a breech baby, maybe they had forceps or a suction or something like that, or maybe a really challenging birthing process, or who knows, maybe they got dropped on their head. Who knows? Everybody's different, right? Everybody's got a different challenge. So just keep that in mind. And basically, what we want to understand is when we're looking at the brain, everything we do in this clinic is focused on healing your brain, whether it's QNRT, neurofeedback, the brain nutrition, chiropractic brain balancing, whatever it might be. Everything's focused on the brain, because if you don't affect here and you try to fix it down here, you're not going to have the long-lasting effect you're looking for. So keep that in mind. If you're going to work with someone, make sure they're looking at your brain first, and everything else is a consequence of that, okay? That's about it. I heard a good quote today. It was, we can either build a case for difficulty or build a case for possibility, okay? So what we want to do is, rather than putting barriers in front of us like diseases and pathologies and symptoms and stuff like that, think about the possibilities, how someone can overcome these issues and basically feel like they can actually capture and recapture their life, right? This young man, and this is little brother, he's had life challenges, right? Different from any of us. There are things that can be done to help him in order to overcome this and be more stable and more functional from a sensory standpoint, which will affect every area of his life easily, okay? So between neurofeedback and QNRT, a lot of things can be done. If there's anything else related outside of that, we'll seek out the solution and we'll go from there. But what you want to appreciate is, don't stop until you get the answers you need, okay? If you've been told by 15 different doctors, I had a consult today, this young woman, I've been to 15 or 18 or I don't know how many different doctors and I still don't have the answers. And that is just unacceptable. But the cool thing is she's still looking, she's still digging, she's still grinding, she wants the answers and she knows there's something out there. She wants to feel her best, and that's why she ended up here. So if you know someone who has a sensory challenge, whether it's a child or an adult, if you know someone who is looking for answers and has not been able to find them, you know where to send them. We're here for you. Put in the comments below what you want us to speak about. We pulled this one out because Anissa asked me about it. I want to be able to serve her as well and her family, but this is for you. So let us know how we can be of service, what kind of information you're looking for, what kind of answers you want, questions you want answered rather. That's what we're here for. Comment below, give it a like, share with your friends and family so people are educated and understand that diseases don't have to limit you. Take the diagnosis, but don't take the prognosis, okay? Because if you get the diagnosis, you get an idea what the symptoms are, then we can dig into the root cause. Does that make sense? Sweet. All right, so we'll see you next week for the Wednesday Wellness Minutes, and let us know how we can help you out. All right, guys, see ya.